I never thought a simple joke could destroy everything. But looking back now, as I sit alone in my cramped studio apartment, I realize that moment at Romano's bistro was when my carefully constructed world began to crumble. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. It was a Friday night in October, one of those crisp Colorado evenings that made you grateful for indoor heating. Our usual group had gathered for dinner: Graham and I, his mother Diane, my mother Marjorie, my sister Julie, and little Clara bouncing excitedly in her booster seat. The restaurant buzzed with weekend energy, wine glasses clinking and conversations flowing. I felt amazing that night. My new dress hugged all the right curves. My hair fell perfectly around my shoulders, and I'd gotten compliments all week at the insurance office. Ryan Calloway, the charming new sales rep, had been particularly attentive, always finding excuses to stop by my desk with his easy smile and playful banter. Graham sat beside me, methodically cutting his steak into precise squares like he always did. Everything about my husband was methodical. His morning routine, his weekend yard work, even the way he folded laundry. At 36, he'd settled into patterns that felt suffocating. "So, Aurelia," Julie said, swirling her wine, "how's the new guy at work? Ryan, right? You mentioned he's been helping with the Henderson claim." I felt a little thrill at the mention of his name. "Oh, Ryan's wonderful. So different from what I'm used to." I glanced meaningfully at Graham, who continued eating without reaction. He actually listens when I talk, makes me feel appreciated. Diane's fork paused halfway to her mouth, but my mother Marjorie laughed. "Good for you, honey. A woman needs to feel valued." "Graham values me," I said with mock seriousness. "Don't you, sweetheart?" I patted his arm condescendingly. "He shows it by reorganizing the garage and falling asleep during movies." The table chuckled, except for Diane, whose lips pressed into a thin line. Graham's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he said nothing. Emboldened by the laughter and wine, I continued. "Honestly, sometimes I wonder what it would be like to be married to someone with actual passion. Someone who surprises you instead of color-coding the bill organizer." "Mom," Clara piped up, "why are you being mean to Daddy?" "I'm not being mean, sweetheart. Mommy's just joking." I ruffled her hair, but she pulled away, moving closer to Graham. Julie shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should talk about something else." But I was on a roll, feeling witty and attractive and powerful. The wine had loosened my tongue, and I loved being the center of attention. "You know what? I have an idea. Let's play a game." I stood up slightly, gesturing grandly. "If I were to trade in my dear husband here for a newer model, someone with more vitality, who would be interested?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I was joking, of course, just having fun, testing boundaries, seeing how far I could push. Then hands started going up. First, a man at the table behind us, mid-40s, wedding ring glinting as he raised his hand with a grin. Then another across the restaurant. A waiter passing by actually paused and lifted his hand with a wink. More hands appeared throughout the dining room, some playful, others serious, until I counted at least 8 different men signaling their interest. My heart raced with excitement and validation. I was desirable. I was wanted. I was... "Aurelia." Graham's voice was quiet, deadly calm. "Sit down." I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and saw something I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but something colder, more final. "Oh, come on, Graham. It's just a joke. Can't you take a..." I said sit down. He placed his napkin carefully beside his plate and stood. "Clara, finish your chicken. Grandma Diane will take you home." "Where are you going?" I asked, suddenly uncertain. Graham pulled out his wallet and placed 3 20s on the table, more than enough to cover our meals. "I'm going home. To think." "Think about what?" It was just harmless fun. He looked at me then with an expression I couldn't read. Was it? The restaurant had gone quiet around us, other diners pretending not to watch while clearly listening to every word. I felt exposed, foolish, like I'd miscalculated badly. Graham, you're overreacting. Everyone knows I was kidding around. Do they? He leaned down, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Because from where I'm sitting, my wife just publicly announced she'd rather be with someone else. And apparently, she's not the only one who thinks that's a good idea. My mother jumped to my defense. Graham, don't be so sensitive. Aurelia was just having a little fun. Marriage shouldn't be a prison. Diane stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Fun? She just humiliated my son in front of a room full of strangers. That's not fun, that's cruel. Now wait just a minute, Marjorie began. No, you wait. Diane's voice shook with suppressed fury. I've watched you enable this behavior for months. The way she talks to him, treats him like he's some burden instead of the good man who works 60 hours a week to provide for her and Clara. Julie reached for her daughter, who had started to cry. Please, not in front of Clara. But the damage was done. Graham kissed the top of Clara's head and walked out without another word, leaving me standing there, with all those hands still raised, feeling suddenly like I'd won a contest I never meant to enter. He'll get over it, I told myself, sitting back down with shaking hands. He always does. But even as I said it, something cold settled in my stomach. Because for the first time in our 10-year marriage, Graham hadn't looked hurt or disappointed when he left. He'd looked determined. Monday morning at the insurance office felt different somehow. Maybe it was the way Graham had barely spoken to me over the weekend, methodically going about his routine while I tried to convince myself, and him, that Friday night had been harmless fun. You're overthinking it, I muttered to myself as I settled at my desk with my coffee. The Henderson claim files spread before me, but I couldn't concentrate. My phone buzzed. Hope you survived the weekend drama. Coffee later? Ryan's text sent a little thrill through me. At least someone understood that life was meant to be enjoyed, not endured through Graham's silent treatment. Survived and thriving. Coffee sounds perfect. I glanced around the office. Most of my coworkers were buried in their Monday morning tasks, but I caught Jennifer from accounting, watching me with an odd expression. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away. Paranoid, I told myself. Everyone's just focused on work. By lunch, I'd managed to push Friday's incident to the back of my mind. Ryan suggested we grab sandwiches from the deli across the street, and I found myself agreeing eagerly. Anything to escape the oppressive quiet that had settled over my house, like a funeral shroud. So, Ryan said as we walked, his hand briefly touching the small of my back to guide me around a puddle. Your husband didn't seem too happy about your little joke. Graham's just sensitive. He takes everything too seriously. The words came easily. I'd been practicing them all weekend. I mean, it was obviously just fun. Everyone was laughing. Everyone except him. Ryan's blue eyes sparkled with mischief. Maybe he's worried he can't compete with the newer models. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in days. Maybe he should be. The flirtation felt natural, harmless. Ryan made me feel appreciated in ways Graham never had. He complimented my intelligence, my sense of humor, the way I handled difficult clients. When he walked me back to the office, his fingers brushed mine as he handed me my coffee. We should do this more often, he said, his voice low and intimate. I'd like that. The afternoon flew by in a haze of stolen glances and text messages. Ryan found excuses to stop by my desk, leaning close to discuss cases, his cologne making me dizzy. Each interaction felt like a small rebellion against Graham's disapproval, against the boring predictability of my marriage. You look beautiful today. That color brings out your eyes. Thank you. It's nice to be noticed. Trust me, you're definitely noticed. Hard to concentrate on work with you looking like that. Behave yourself. We're in the office. Can't help myself. You're distracting. By 5 o'clock, my phone was full of messages that made me feel desired, wanted, alive. I drove home with music turned up loud, singing along and feeling more like myself than I had in years. Graham was in the kitchen when I arrived, helping Clara with homework at the counter. The domestic scene should have warmed my heart, but instead it felt suffocating. "How was work?" he asked, without looking up from Clara's math worksheet. "Fine, busy. The Henderson claim is getting complicated." I set my purse down, my phone buzzing with another message from Ryan. I glanced at it quickly. "Dinner tomorrow? Just the two of us this time." My pulse quickened as I typed back, "I'll think about it." "Who's texting you?" Graham's voice was casual, but something in his tone made me look up. "Just work stuff, you know how it is." He nodded, but I caught him watching me with that same unreadable expression from Friday night. "Must be important work stuff. You've been smiling at your phone for the past 5 minutes. "Have I?" I forced a laugh. "I didn't realize. Just glad to be home." But even as I said it, I was thinking about Ryan's invitation. When was the last time Graham had asked me to dinner? When was the last time he'd made me feel like a woman instead of just a wife and mother? That evening, after Clara was in bed, I called my mother. "He's still giving you the cold shoulder?" Marjorie's voice was indignant. "Honestly, Aurelia, you deserve better than this. A man should be able to take a joke." "That's what I keep telling myself, but he's acting like I committed some terrible crime." "You didn't do anything wrong, honey. You're a beautiful, vibrant woman. If Graham can't appreciate that, maybe it's time to consider your options." Her words echoed in my head as I got ready for bed. Graham was already lying down, reading one of his technical manuals. The space between us felt like an ocean. "Graham," I said softly, "can we talk about Friday night?" He set down his book and looked at me. "What about it?" "I think you misunderstood. It was just a silly joke. I didn't mean anything by it." "Didn't you?" The question hung between us. I wanted to say no, of course not, but the word stuck in my throat. "I love you," I said instead, which wasn't quite the same thing. "I know." He picked up his book again. "But love isn't always enough, is it?" I lay awake long after his breathing evened out, staring at the ceiling and thinking about Ryan's dinner invitation. Graham was being unreasonable, punishing me for a moment of harmless fun. Maybe my mother was right. Maybe I did deserve better. My phone buzzed softly on the nightstand. "Sweet dreams. Beautiful. Can't wait to see you tomorrow." I smiled in the darkness and typed back, "Dinner sounds perfect." The dinner with Ryan had been intoxicating. 2 hours of uninterrupted attention, compliments, and conversation that didn't revolve around Clara's school schedule or Graham's latest home improvement project. Ryan made me laugh, made me feel clever and desirable. When he walked me to my car, the goodnight kiss felt inevitable, natural. I told myself it was just a kiss, just a moment of feeling alive again. But the guilt followed me home, where Graham was waiting in the living room, still dressed despite the late hour. "How was dinner with your sister?" His voice was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. "Fine. We talked about Mum's birthday party next month." The lie came easily, practiced. "Why are you still up?" "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd wait up to make sure you got home safely." There was something in his tone that made my skin prickle, but I pushed the feeling away. Graham was suspicious by nature, always looking for problems where none existed. The next few weeks fell into a pattern of secret messages and stolen moments. Ryan and I found reasons to work late together, grabbed coffee during lunch breaks, shared inside jokes that made me feel part of something exciting and forbidden. Each interaction felt like proof that I was still attractive, still worth pursuing. Graham noticed the changes, my new attention to makeup, the way I guarded my phone, my sudden enthusiasm for after-work meetings. But instead of fighting, he seemed to withdraw further into himself, becoming even quieter and more methodical. "He's probably having his own midlife crisis," I told Ryan one afternoon, as we sat in his car in the parking garage. Men his age get weird about their mortality or whatever. Ryan's hand found mine across the center console. Maybe he knows he's losing you. The words sent a thrill through me. Was that what was happening? Was I finally breaking free from the suffocating routine of my marriage? That weekend, we were hosting dinner for both our families, a monthly tradition that had become increasingly strained. I spent Saturday afternoon cooking, trying to ignore the way Graham moved around me in the kitchen like we were strangers sharing space. Diane arrived first, bringing Clara a new book and barely acknowledging me. My mother came with Julie and a bottle of wine, immediately launching into complaints about her neighbor's barking dog. "Where's Graham?" Marjorie asked, settling into her usual spot on the couch. "Upstairs changing. He spent all day working in the yard." I rolled my eyes, because apparently our perfectly fine landscaping needed to be optimized. "Men and their projects," my mother laughed. "Your father was the same way, always finding busy work to avoid real conversation." Julie shot me a look. "Maybe he enjoys yard work. Not everything has to be about avoiding you, Aurelia." I didn't say it was about me. I just think it's funny how he'd rather spend his Saturday digging holes than spending time with his family. "Maybe because his family doesn't seem to appreciate him much," Diane said quietly from the corner chair. The room went silent. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Diane set down her teacup with deliberate precision. "I've watched you criticize and belittle my son for months. The way you talk about him, to him, like he's some failure, instead of a good man who works himself to death providing for you." "Diane, that's enough," Marjorie interjected. "You don't know what goes on in their marriage." "I know what I see, and what I see is a woman who's forgotten how lucky she is." Before I could respond, Graham appeared in the doorway. He'd changed into a clean shirt and jeans, his hair still damp from the shower. For a moment, I saw him the way a stranger might. Tall, solid, quietly handsome in an understated way. Then the moment passed. "Sorry to keep everyone waiting. Dinner's ready." We moved to the dining room, the tension from the living room following us like a cloud. I tried to salvage the evening with bright chatter about work, about Clara's upcoming school play, about anything that might restore the normal family atmosphere. But somehow, every topic circled back to Graham's shortcomings. "The Henderson claim is finally resolved," I announced over the salad course. "Thank God for Ryan's help. He really knows how to handle difficult clients, so much more assertive than some people." Graham continued eating without comment. "Aurelia," Julie said carefully, "maybe we could talk about something else." "What? I'm just saying it's nice to work with someone who takes charge, who doesn't need everything explained 3 times before they act." "Like Graham does." Diane's voice was ice. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." Clara, who had been quietly drawing on her placemat, suddenly looked up. "Why doesn't anyone like Daddy anymore?" The question hit the table like a bomb. Everyone froze, looking at my 8-year-old daughter, who had somehow sensed the undercurrents none of us wanted to acknowledge. "Everyone likes Daddy, sweetheart," Graham said gently, reaching over to smooth her hair. "No, they don't. Mummy's always mad at you, and Grandma Marjorie says mean things, and everyone's always fighting." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't like it when people are mean to you." My heart clenched. "Clara, honey, nobody's being mean. Adults just disagree sometimes." "You are too being mean," Clara's voice rose. "You say Daddy's boring and stupid, and you like the man at your work better." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt every eye at the table on me, felt the weight of my daughter's innocent honesty exposing truths I'd been trying to hide. "Clara," I said carefully, "Mommy never said Daddy was stupid." "Yes, you did. On the phone with Grandma, you said he was stupid and boring and Ryan was better." Graham's face had gone completely blank. He set down his fork with the same careful precision he used for everything else. "I think," he said quietly, "Clara should finish her dinner upstairs. She can watch a movie on the iPad." "Graham," I started. "Now." His voice was still quiet, but something in it made Clara scramble down from her chair without argument. He helped her fix a plate and walked her upstairs, leaving the rest of us in suffocating silence. When he returned, Diane was already putting on her coat. "I won't sit here and watch this anymore," she said. "Graham, call me tomorrow. Clara's welcome at my house any time she needs to get away from this." She left without saying goodbye to me. Julie followed soon after, mumbling excuses about early morning plans. Only my mother remained, loyally defending my behavior. "They're overreacting," she said as we cleared dishes. "Marriage is hard work. You're allowed to have feelings." But even her support felt hollow as I watched Graham methodically loading the dishwasher, his movements mechanical and distant. Later that night, after my mother had gone home and Clara was asleep, I found Graham in his home office, sitting at the computer. "We need to talk," I said. "Do we?" He didn't look up from the screen. "Yes, about tonight. About what Clara said. I think she misunderstood." "Did she?" Now he looked at me, and again I saw that cold determination I'd glimpsed at the restaurant. "Because from where I'm sitting, our 8-year-old daughter just demonstrated better listening skills than I gave her credit for." "It's not what you think." "Isn't it?" He turned back to the computer. "I think it's exactly what I think. The question is, what are we going to do about it?" I wanted to explain, to make him understand that I wasn't trying to hurt him, that I just needed to feel valued and appreciated, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I stood there watching my husband work, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. On the screen, I caught a glimpse of what he was typing before he minimized the window. It looked like an email, formal and businesslike. "What are you working on?" I asked. "Just some paperwork. Nothing you need to worry about." But something in his tone suggested I should be worried. Very worried indeed. The following Tuesday started like any other day, but it ended with my world tilting off its axis. I was at my desk, reviewing claim files and exchanging flirtatious texts with Ryan when the receptionist appeared with a nervous expression. "Aurelia, there's someone here to see you. Says it's personal." I looked up to see a woman in a crisp business suit standing in the lobby, holding a manila envelope. Everything about her screamed professional, from her perfectly styled hair to her expensive briefcase. "Mrs. Aurelia Voss?" she asked as I approached. "Yes. I'm Patricia Chen, attorney at law. I represent your husband in a domestic matter." She handed me the envelope with practiced efficiency. "You're being served with divorce papers and a petition for legal separation." The words hit me like a physical blow. Around us, the office had gone silent, my coworkers pretending to work while obviously listening to every word. "I'm sorry, what?" My voice came out as a croak. "The documents are self-explanatory. You have 30 days to respond through legal counsel. Have a good day, Mrs. Voss." She was gone before I could process what had happened, leaving me standing in the lobby holding an envelope that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I was dimly aware of whispers starting behind me, of Ryan appearing at my elbow with concern in his eyes. "Aurelia, what's going on?" I couldn't answer. My hands were shaking as I opened the envelope and scanned the legal documents inside. Petition for dissolution of marriage, irreconcilable differences, request for primary custody of minor child, and attached to the back, a thick folder labeled supporting evidence. My blood turned to ice as I flipped through photographs of Ryan and me at lunch, printouts of our text messages, bank statements showing the expensive dinners I'd claimed were with Julie, even screenshots of my social media posts, complaining about Graham. "Oh God," I whispered. "Aurelia." Ryan's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Maybe you should sit down." I looked at him then, really looked, and saw something I'd missed before. He wasn't shocked by the divorce papers. He looked uncomfortable, yes, but not surprised. "Did you know?" I asked. "Know what?" "Did you know he was having me watched? That someone was taking pictures?" Ryan's hesitation was answer enough. "Look, maybe we should talk about this later, when you've had time to process. You knew. The realization hit me like a slap. You knew and you didn't tell me. I suspected he might be suspicious, yeah. But Aurelia, we weren't doing anything really wrong. Just lunch and talking and kissing, and making plans to do more than that. Ryan glanced around the office, clearly aware that we had an audience. Maybe this is for the best. I mean, you weren't happy in your marriage anyway, right? This just speeds things up. The casual way he said it, like my life falling apart was a minor inconvenience, made me want to scream. But instead, I gathered the papers and walked back to my desk on unsteady legs. I called Graham immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I called the house. No answer. Panic was setting in, a cold dread that made it hard to breathe. I left work early, claiming sudden illness, and drove home through a haze of shock and disbelief. Graham's truck was in the driveway, but when I burst through the front door, the house felt different, emptier. "Graham," I called. "Graham, we need to talk." He appeared at the top of the stairs carrying a suitcase. Behind him, I could see Clara's room, half-packed boxes stacked against the walls. "Where are you going?" My voice was shrill, desperate. "My mother's. Temporarily." He came down the stairs with that same careful precision he used for everything, setting the suitcase by the door. "Clara's already there. I picked her up from school early." "You can't take her away from me." "I'm not taking her away. I'm protecting her from an increasingly toxic environment." His voice was maddeningly calm. "She'll still see you, Aurelia, but she won't live in a house where her mother openly disrespects her father." I stared at him, this man I'd been married to for 10 years, and realized I'd never seen him like this. Not angry, not emotional, just resolved. "Graham, please, we can work this out. The thing with Ryan, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think." He pulled out his phone and showed me a text message. My text message, sent just that morning. "Can't wait to see you tonight. G is working late again. We'll have plenty of time to ourselves." I'd been planning to meet Ryan at his apartment. The first time we would have been truly alone, truly crossed the line from emotional affair to physical betrayal. I wasn't going to... "Yes, you were." Graham pocketed the phone. "And maybe you still will. That's your choice now. But you'll make it as a single woman, not as my wife." The finality in his voice terrified me. "This is crazy. Over some harmless flirting. Over a few text messages." "Harmless?" For the first time, emotion crept into his voice. "You humiliated me in public. You've been carrying on an affair for weeks. You've turned our daughter against me with your constant criticism and complaints. You've poisoned family dinners and made our home a place I dread coming back to." He paused, collecting himself. "That's not harmless, Aurelia. That's cruel." "I never meant..." "Yes, you did." He picked up his suitcase. "You meant every word, every look, every cruel joke. You wanted to hurt me because hurting me made you feel powerful. Well, congratulations. You succeeded." I followed him to the door, desperate to make him understand. "Graham, please. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work it out." He turned on the porch, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the man who had once loved me enough to propose on a beach in Mexico, who had held my hand through labor, who had built Clara a treehouse with his own hands. "I asked you to go to counseling 6 months ago," he said quietly. "You said we didn't need it. I asked you to stop criticizing me in front of our daughter. You said I was being too sensitive. I asked you to put down your phone during dinner and actually talk to us. You said I was controlling." He shook his head. "I asked for a lot of things, Aurelia. You gave me nothing but contempt. That's not true, isn't it?" He pulled out his phone again, scrolled to something and held it up. It was a voice recording, my voice, talking to someone on the phone. "Graham is such a disappointment. He has no ambition, no passion. Sometimes I wonder what I ever saw in him. Ryan makes me feel alive again, you know, like I'm worth something." I remembered that conversation with my mother. remembered feeling frustrated and unappreciated. But hearing my words played back, hearing the venom in my own voice, made me sick. I was just venting to my mother-in-law about how worthless you think I am, while I was upstairs helping our daughter with homework. Graham put the phone away. That's when I knew this marriage was over. When I realized you didn't just disrespect me, you despised me. He walked to his truck, threw the suitcase in the back, and paused with his hand on the door handle. The papers give you 30 days to respond. My lawyer will be in touch about custody arrangements and property division. Until then, Clara stays with me. Graham, wait! But he was already driving away, leaving me standing alone in the driveway of our house. A house that suddenly felt like a mausoleum of everything I'd destroyed. The next few weeks passed in a blur of desperate phone calls and failed attempts at damage control. Graham wouldn't take my calls directly, routing all communication through his lawyer. Clara was allowed to visit me on weekends, but the conversations were stilted and painful. "Daddy says you're getting divorced," she said during one particularly difficult Saturday afternoon. We were sitting in the living room, surrounded by the detritus of my collapsing life, legal documents, empty wine bottles, tissues from countless crying jags. "Yes, sweetheart, but that doesn't mean we don't love you." "Did you really say mean things about Daddy?" The question cut deep because it came from a place of pure innocence. Clara wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to understand how her world had fallen apart. Sometimes grown-ups say things they don't mean when they're upset. "But you did mean them. I heard you lots of times." I couldn't argue with that, out of the mouths of babes. My family was splitting along predictable lines. My mother remained fiercely loyal, convinced that Graham was overreacting and that I was the victim of an unreasonable husband's wounded pride. "He's trying to punish you for having feelings," she said during one of her daily check-in calls. "Men can't handle it when women show any independence." But Julie was pulling away, her responses to my calls growing shorter and less sympathetic. "Maybe you should focus on what you did wrong instead of what Graham's doing to you," she said bluntly when I called crying about the latest legal development. "I thought you were on my side." "I'm on Clara's side, and from where I'm sitting, she's better off with the parent who isn't having an affair." The word hung between us like an accusation. Affair. I'd been trying to avoid that label, telling myself it was just flirtation, just emotional connection. But the evidence Graham's lawyer had compiled told a different story. Ryan, meanwhile, had become increasingly distant. The excitement of our secret romance evaporated the moment real consequences appeared. "I think we should cool things off for a while," he said when I cornered him at work the Monday after the divorce papers were served. "Until your situation gets sorted out." "My situation?" "The divorce, the custody thing. It's getting complicated." "It was always going to be complicated, Ryan. That's what happens when married people get involved." He looked uncomfortable, glancing around the office to make sure we weren't being overheard. "Look, I like you, Aurelia. I really do. But I'm not looking for anything serious right now. I thought you understood that." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. "I left my marriage for you." "No, you left your marriage because you were unhappy. I was just there. Just there. Like I was some desperate housewife throwing herself at the first man who paid attention to her." The humiliation burned worse than any of Graham's accusations. Work became unbearable. My coworkers treated me with a mixture of pity and judgment, conversation stopping when I walked by, whispers following in my wake. The story of my public divorce had spread through the office like wildfire, and I could feel their eyes on me constantly. Jennifer from accounting actually approached me in the break room one afternoon, her expression sympathetic but pointed. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I always thought Graham seemed like a really good guy. The few times I met him at company parties." "He is a good guy," I said automatically. "Then why—" She trailed off, but the question hung in the air. "Why did you throw it all away?" I didn't have a good answer, not one that made sense to anyone else, or even to myself anymore. The legal proceedings moved forward with grinding inevitability. Graham's lawyer was thorough and professional, presenting a case that painted me as an unfit mother and unfaithful wife. The evidence was damning, not just the affair, but months of documented emotional abuse, financial irresponsibility, and neglect of Clara's needs. My own lawyer, a harried public defender I could barely afford, advised me to settle quickly. "Your husband is being more than fair," he said, spreading the proposed agreement across his desk. "Joint custody with him as primary guardian, equitable division of assets, reasonable alimony. If we go to trial, you could lose much more." "But I'm her mother." "You're also an adulteress who's been emotionally abusing your husband in front of your child. Family court judges don't look kindly on that." The word adulteress hit me like a slap. It sounded so old-fashioned, so harsh, but legally, that's exactly what I was. I signed the papers with shaking hands, officially ending my marriage and accepting a custody arrangement that gave me every other weekend and alternating holidays. Clara would live with Graham, attend school in his district, call his house home. The final hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in November. I wore my best suit and tried to project dignity, but inside I felt hollow, scraped clean of everything that had once defined me. Graham sat across the courtroom with his lawyer, looking calm and composed. He'd lost weight, and there were new lines around his eyes, but he carried himself with a quiet strength I'd never noticed before. Or maybe I'd noticed it and chosen to see it as weakness instead. When the judge asked if I had anything to say before finalizing the decree, I stood on unsteady legs. "Your Honor, I want to say that I take full responsibility for the failure of my marriage. I made terrible choices that hurt the people I love most. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope I can be a better mother going forward than I was a wife." It wasn't much, but it was honest. More honest than I'd been in months. The judge nodded and signed the papers, officially dissolving our marriage and granting Graham primary custody of Clara. Just like that, 10 years of marriage ended with the stroke of a pen. As we filed out of the courtroom, Graham paused beside me in the hallway. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I hope you find whatever it was you were looking for." Then he walked away, leaving me standing alone in the courthouse corridor, officially divorced and finally understanding exactly what I'd lost. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. I'd moved into a small apartment across town, started seeing a therapist, and was slowly rebuilding my relationship with Clara during our court-mandated visits. The affair with Ryan had ended as abruptly as it began. He'd transferred to another office, claiming he needed a fresh start. I suspected his superiors had encouraged the move after our workplace drama became common knowledge. Graham and I had settled into a cordial, co-parenting routine. He was unfailingly polite during custody exchanges, asking about my job and health with the kind of distant courtesy he might show a neighbor. It hurt, but I told myself it was progress. Then I got the call from my lawyer. "Aurelia, we have a problem. Graham's attorney has filed additional motions." My blood went cold. "What kind of motions?" "He's requesting full custody. Supervised visitation only for you." "What? Why? I've been following the custody agreement perfectly." "There's been an incident, something involving Clara at school." My mind raced. Clara had seemed fine during our last visit, chattering about her friends and her upcoming dance recital. "What kind of incident?" "You need to come in. We'll discuss it in person." The meeting was scheduled for the next morning, but I couldn't wait. I drove straight to Graham's house, my heart pounding with panic and confusion. Diane answered the door, her expression colder than I'd ever seen it. "She's not here," she said before I could speak. "Where is she? I need to talk to Graham." "He's at work. Clara's at my house." Diane stepped onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind her. "And frankly, I think that's the best place for her right now." "What happened? What incident?" Diane studied my face for a long moment, as if deciding how much to tell me. Clara told her teacher that Mommy's new boyfriend hits her. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? That's impossible. I don't have a boyfriend and nobody has ever hit Clara. Don't they? Diane's voice was ice. Because according to Clara, you've been bringing men to your apartment during her visits. Men who drink too much and get angry when she makes noise. I felt the world spinning around me. That's not... yes, I've had a couple of dates, but nothing serious. And nobody ever touched Clara. One of them grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises when she spilled juice on his shirt. She showed the marks to her teacher. The memory came flooding back. David, a man I'd met through a dating app. He'd seemed nice enough, charming and attentive. I'd invited him over for dinner during one of Clara's weekend visits, thinking it would be good for her to see me happy again. But David had been drinking before he arrived, and he'd continued drinking throughout the evening. When Clara accidentally knocked over her glass at dinner, he'd grabbed her wrist roughly, his grip tight enough to make her cry. I'd ended the date immediately, told him to leave, comforted Clara. The marks had faded within a day, and she'd seemed fine afterward. I thought it was forgotten. It was an accident, I said weakly. He didn't mean to hurt her. I made him leave as soon as it happened. You exposed our granddaughter to a violent drunk, Diane said, her voice shaking with fury. You put your need for male attention above her safety. It wasn't like that, wasn't it? Because from where I'm standing, you haven't learned anything. You're still the same selfish woman who destroyed her marriage, chasing after men who don't care about her. The truth of it hit harder than any slap. Because she was right. Even after losing Graham, even after the humiliation of the divorce, I'd been so desperate to prove my desirability that I'd brought strangers around my daughter. I made a mistake, I whispered. You made a choice. The same choice you've been making for years, putting yourself first and everyone else second. That afternoon, I sat in my lawyer's office listening to him explain the legal ramifications of what Clara had reported. Child Protective Services has opened an investigation, he said, his expression grave. They'll interview Clara, examine any evidence, and make a recommendation to the court. But it was one incident, one mistake, one incident of child endangerment, and given your history, the affair, the emotional instability documented during the divorce proceedings, the court is likely to view this as part of a pattern. What does that mean? It means you could lose visitation rights entirely. Graham's attorney is arguing that you're an unfit mother who puts Clara at risk. The next few weeks were a nightmare of interviews, evaluations, and legal proceedings. Clara was questioned by social workers, examined by doctors, asked to recount the incident over and over again. I was required to undergo psychological evaluation, parenting classes, and supervised visitation pending the outcome of the investigation. Every other weekend, I sat in a sterile room at the Family Services office while a social worker watched me interact with my own daughter. Clara was confused and frightened by the attention, clinging to Graham during custody exchanges, and growing increasingly withdrawn during our supervised visits. Why can't I come to your apartment anymore? She asked during one particularly difficult session. Because Mommy made some bad choices, and now we have to follow new rules until I can prove I've learned better. Are you going to bring more mean men around? The question broke my heart. No, sweetheart, no more men, just you and me. But even as I said it, I could see the doubt in her 8-year-old eyes. I'd broken her trust, and earning it back would take more than promises. The final hearing was held on a grey February morning. The courtroom was smaller this time, just the judge, the lawyers, and the social worker who had been overseeing my case. Graham sat in the front row, looking tired but determined. He'd lost more weight, and I noticed new grey threads in his hair. The stress of fighting for our daughter was taking its toll on him too. The social worker's report was damning but fair. She acknowledged that the incident with David appeared to be isolated, that I'd removed him from the situation immediately, and that I'd shown genuine remorse and commitment to change. But she also noted my history of poor judgment, my tendency to prioritize my own needs over Clara's, and my failure to provide a stable, safe environment. "It is my recommendation," she concluded, "that primary custody remain with the father, with supervised visitation for the mother, until she can demonstrate sustained behavioral change and completion of court-mandated programs." The judge agreed. I was sentenced to 6 months of supervised visitation, followed by gradual reintroduction of overnight visits if I successfully completed parenting classes, anger management, and individual therapy. As the courtroom emptied, Graham approached me one final time. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "this isn't about punishing you. It's about protecting Clara." "I know." The words came out as a whisper. "I'm sorry, Graham, for everything." He nodded, his expression softening slightly. "I hope you get the help you need, Aurelia. Clara needs her mother, the best version of her mother." Then he was gone, leaving me alone with my lawyer and the wreckage of everything I'd once taken for granted. That night, I sat in my empty apartment and finally understood the true cost of my choices. I'd lost my husband, my daughter, my family, my reputation, all for the fleeting validation of men who'd never really cared about me at all. But for the first time in months, I also felt something I hadn't expected: determination. Not to win Graham back, that ship had sailed, but to become the mother Clara deserved, to prove that I could change, that I could put someone else's needs before my own. It would take time, it would take work, but maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to salvage something meaningful from the ruins of my old life. The road back would be long and difficult, but I was finally ready to walk it. Graham had won, completely and decisively. He had our daughter, our house, the respect of our community, and the moral high ground. I had a studio apartment and supervised visitation, but somehow, in losing everything, I'd finally found the motivation to become someone worth respecting.